if I saw that tabloid, I might feel like the need to buy it.
Jump off a bridge.
I'm sorry, I would have to.
No,
If
jump off a
nothing else,
bridge.
just to post a picture of it.
So anyway, the what this particular MMO Examiner article directed us to was, of course, a Reddit post talking about Final Fantasy XIV's penalty system and if there is a problem with it. To which I almost immediately thought, wait, Final Fantasy XIV has a penalty system?
Wait, what are they talking about? Penalty? Like
your gear breaking?
No, like getting in trouble for stuff. Like
yeah. I read this article.
GMs?
Yes, like how someone will get only like a day for actually hacking, and then you like call someone an asshole and you get banned forever.
Yeah, essentially they have a 1, 2, 3 strike system, right? And your first one gives you a 24-hour ban, second one a 72-hour ban, then a 216-hour ban. Whether it's cheating, whether it's harassment, whether it's
all equal.
Everything carries exactly the same weight. Yeah. First of all, like I said, I didn't even realize that this was much of a problem because I feel like I don't ever hear of any stories of people getting even banned, not even just unjustly banned. I mean, I recall years and years and years ago when we actually, on a show, we had talked about some, I don't want to say controversies that have happened, but we had a few stories about people being harassed for weeks, months on end, and having them submit all types of documentation, actually communicating not just with GMs, but like with customer support outside of the game, and nothing ever happened.
Oh, that's shitty.
But yet somehow there's a problem with their archaic form of policing.
Does MMO Examiner like take a stance on this?
No, of course not. I mean, if you go to the
They're just examining, not opinionating.
They're not even examining. They're just copy and pasting. I mean, the actual post itself, there's a lot of thought that went into it. I mean, this guy outlines like the roles of GMs, the role of the Square Enix account policy, why you should care, even gives like potential solutions and stuff like that. That's why when I looked at it, I'm like, I feel like a lot more here than I ever would have guessed was being here. On FEC today, we talked about how Overwatch kind of or Overwatch is apparently going far beyond where they need to deal with the toxic community to the point where they're like, it's interfering with our development stuff, right? So I feel like when you have toxic communities or when you have communities or games that actually deal with policies and stuff like this, it tends to be an issue. Like you hear about it happening. When was the last time you guys heard anything about bannings outside of the official forums?
Oh, God, never.
On the Facebook page.
Really? People talk about getting banned on Facebook?
Yeah,
or talking about their bannings.
Yeah, talking about getting banned. I've seen that. Especially because like the fact is that because it gets all the same weight, when people post about their bannings is when they're like, yeah, I've had the 3 strikes, but literally all I did once was like say the word asshole to my friend and someone else was offended and reported me and I got in trouble. Like
what? Wait, hold on, you got in trouble for that? Like
not me, but like that's what people that's the kind of stuff that people are saying.
That sounds like straw manning though. I mean, like that it sounds if ever I come across something like that, I'm like, yeah, really, was it the asshole that did it? Or
I mean, that's true.
Was you being in a party and calling someone a faggot earlier in the day, the thing that did it, or the thing, you know what I mean? Like there's so many different like the reason someone thinks they're banned can be at odds or can be an entirely different incident than from what the company.
A lot of times people actually post like the GM tells where they're like, so we heard that you did this earlier to someone, just gonna I'm investigating this, like tell me what happened. Like I've seen people actually do that, so they know why they're being examined.
It still kind of falls in with what Aniro is saying here, because someone could be reported for have saying 1 or 2 things, right? They're showing you the conversation, but if the GM then goes back and investigates it further after they've talked with them and sees multiple infractions even beyond that weren't necessarily reported, then it still doesn't show the entire story.
That's true.
But I like when you talk about the way that Square Enix has handled, bannings and everything, they've been pretty archaic all the way back to FF11. How many games do you know of that had a jail that you were taken to? Like, was that a common thing for MMOs at the time? Because I'd never heard of
that. That's a good question. I never actually really even thought to wonder that. I guess I just kind of assumed that was kind of a thing.
What happens when you get thing? What happens when you get reported in WoW?
Well, if you get banned, then you just get banned. You can't log in. That's actually a really good point. Why actually make a jail that you put the player into to log into instead of just banning them from being able to log in for X amount of hours?
I'm told that some games did have a jail.
Yep.
That it's not horribly uncommon.
Says as Sheeran's Call had a jail. Jails are not unique.
And jails weren't necessarily just for like, I feel like jails were while they were currently investigating, because I know I got pulled into Mordian jail once in 11 because I was at this horribly cheap apartment in when I was at CMU, and the internet there was like in-house. It was like whatever their in-house system was. That was not like a real ISP. It was horrible. And the lag was so bad. It thought that I was botting, and it pulled me because they had that automatic bot detection system or whatever the hell that was. And so I was actually like, I was leveling up in Quiffim, and then I like went AFK out by like Lothian Plateau, and I went to the store, came back, and I was in Mordian jail. I'm like, what the fuck? And so I had to like call the GM to come and talk to me because I was like stuck in there. I was like saying something to say, and like they weren't responding to me. So I had to actually call the GM. It took them forever to get back to me. And then and then I just told them, I was like, I was in Quiffim, then I went AFK, and then they went back in my logs. I'm like, oh, you're right. Have a good day. And they sent me out. Like,
that's okay. So I have a question, Nika, real quick.
Yeah.
Was this before or after your Pandemonium Warden kill?
After.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Anyway, Nika, that actually I think segues into one of the things that the guy brings up in the post that I think I do kind of actually agree with, and the roles of GMs within the game. And I think this might actually explain too why some of those stories that we touched on years ago didn't see any kind of resolution for so long, is that it really comes down to the GM themselves to determine if the infraction A has occurred, how to deal with how to appropriately deal with it, and the flexibility between GMs could vary widely. I mean, if there isn't any kind of actual criteria that they have to look at and follow, that could actually I think be a pretty big problem in account policies and stuff like that.
But if you're trying to find a way to deal with people on an equitable level, like what we're talking about, like everything is punished equally, and I don't see, like, you've already invested in a system, right, where you have GMs who are obviously looking into everything on a case-by-case basis, but you're not instilling them with any authority to make a decision or make a determination about what is worthy of what kind of punishment. I can see where people would get really frustrated, and that's where those straw man arguments come from of, well, I called someone an asshole, and I got the same ban that my friend got, for threatening to murder somebody. Like, it's like,
Jesus.
But you get what I'm saying.
Actually, breaking the game code and cheating.
Right.
That's just extremely frustrating to me, and I can see why. Like, I don't know that I necessarily care about it because MMO Examiner is picking it up, but I would be really curious to know what our listener base, if they've ever had any, experience with GMs in this game. Has this ever happened to you? Have you had to deal with a GM? Have they treated you unfairly, or has it been mostly equitable? And you can check us out on Discord. I got the link put in the chat now. Hashtag LBR calls. Drop your name and server, and we'll get you pulled up, and you can give us your story on that.
Yeah. Specifically, if you were contacted by a GM because you were reported for something. I've had tons of contact with GMs before because I've reported someone, and there's...
Oh, you're that guy.
There's never been anything special about that. They show up. It seems very, copy and kind of paste about what happens. And then that's it. And it's really hard to even go on, stories that people have told, because as Nate says, when other people, even if they have screenshots, Nika, of the GM conversation, you have no idea how much of the story you're actually getting and the stuff that's actually gone into it before. So it's even hard to take that kind of stuff into consideration. I will say, however, that based on some of the stories that I've seen or some of the stories that I've heard, be it on the official forums or on the Facebook pages, because the action or inaction seems to vary so widely between cases, it obviously could, yes, fall into the side of the camp that, you're not getting the whole story. But based on the fact that it's really up to the GMs whether or not to pursue something, and how how different it could be based on GM's temperament or, how they decide to deal with it, that could also relate to why sometimes the judgments or the punishments that are being handed out vary so widely from case to case.
Yeah, but that's discretion, and police officers use discretion in the moment when, like if they have you pulled over in a traffic stop, or like
That's also true.
there's plenty of discretion, and that has to be a factor that is allowed to factor into the decisions of people who oversee things, whether you're a cop, whether you're a GM. But they have their own standards, right? Like they have their own standards that they have to meet to be able to continue doing their job, or at least we think that they do, right? Like that's supposed to be the way that it works.
Well, because you would think that, let's say you deal with one GM one day for something, and again, this is like a persisting problem that, let's say it's harassment that goes over several months, and you don't see anything happening. What I kind of wonder, and again, it's going to be entirely speculation on my point, if there's no type of overall documentation or communication between people, or between GMs, you get different GMs every time, that could also relate to why sometimes these infractions go for so long before they're finally dealt with, if they ever are.
And that's it's like, I think back to the days of Final Fantasy 11 and the ways that GMs would interact with us as players. This may be a side effect of having a smaller community or a smaller game that's playing, but we used to hear all the time about like little fun things, like little human things that GMs would do. And I don't know if it's across all games, whether it's just Square Enix internally wanting to have their support system run like this, but I feel like there has been a pulling back of like that human element, and that a lot of punishments are done by the book. And again, like I feel like there was a concerted effort, or there used to be a bigger concerted effort at games that had online components policing their own community, that has been subsequently, I don't want to say downplayed or ignored, but in the years since that's become the norm for most games, that it's just kind of been like, oh, well, we don't have to worry about that as much. Like Final Fantasy.
Yeah, you're right. You see a lot less of that. I don't know if it was something that they went out of their way to do. I think in most cases it was players sharing, their cool or cute experiences with GMs, because as Peckmec the First says, some of the FF14 GMs RP with you, and I think that's the.
I was actually just going to bring that up. I feel like every GM in both 11 and 14 always kind of RP.
And
like, greetings, adventurer.
Yes, and in World of Warcraft,
and in World of Warcraft,
it's part of the brand. They don't want to break the immersion technically. So yeah, I get why they do that. And yeah, to Nero's point, I think the reason you saw that a lot of time was when people did have fun with it, they could sort of put that out there, and yeah, you got to see like a sort of different human side to it. And you're right. I don't know when the last time was that I saw something like that, but based on the fact that it's usually players that leak those types of things, I don't necessarily know if you can put it on the different companies for having scaled something back to affect that.
I think, like, you talk about, like, Nero mentioned that in 11, the GMs were a bit more, I don't know if they had more, there were small things that they did that would make it feel more like they had personality. They weren't just a machine coming to lay down the law on you as written by the book. Like, and I mean, like, I've heard of, like, ridiculous things. Like, my buddy got married in FF11, and, like, at the end of it, as a prank, he got his girlfriend taken to GM jail. A GM agreed to appear and take her to jail at the end of their wedding. Like,
okay. Oh, okay. I see. Well, whereas now, they probably do actually have like a little sort of like list that they have to like, follow, things for like escalation, and how each response is probably copy and pasted from something.
Every interaction is very scripted. There's something that they go by the book. It's like, okay, when you do this, then you say this, then you say this. Have you resolved the problem? No? Okay, then do this. Yes, then end the conversation. Like, everything feels very scripted, and that's kind of where maybe the punishments have started to get kind of the same way. It's like, oh, okay, you had some sort of infraction occur. Was it an infraction? Yes? Okay, here's your punishment. Do that. Whereas back in the day, yeah, your GM would talk to you for a little while. My one great like GM experience that I had was in 11, and I was farming Bugards because I needed money, and I was poor, and I wanted a sweet new polearm. But
wait, was that like a metaphor for being transgendered?
Probably. I was in college at the time. I don't know. Anyway, So I was farming Bugards, and there was another guy there who was a gill seller. I mean, if he wasn't, he was cosplaying as one. He absolutely had all the standard gill seller attire on, just high enough level thief to run around and go do that.
Okay, you know what? Actually, I'm sorry to cut in your story, and I'm going to let you finish. But you know what? No, you do not get to label him like that, because there was one time when I was hunting Leaping Lizzie,
Okay.
right? That me and a friend had gone out there. She just barely had it leveled, right? We didn't want anyone like sending us any messages or asking us into parties, so we went to a non.
Yeah.
We were on like little
non.
mule jobs, so like ranger and stuff. So we didn't have any gear, so we were wearing like the bare minimum. We were really like glued to like watching that wide scan.
Yeah.
So we took off our link shell to make sure that nobody, would send us any message, or we wouldn't get distracted. And there were people running around accusing us of being gill sellers, because you know what? We were dressed like them.
Okay, now you were cosplaying as a gill seller, but let me ask you something. Was your name as
No.
Yes, it's hot. And well,
I didn't think so. So anyway, I see this guy running around beating me to camps almost every single time. It's almost like he knew where things were getting ready to spawn. Anyway, I started getting kind of annoyed with it, and just as a kind of snarky remark, I just /tell ni hao to him. And he replied. He said ni hao back to me. And so I said, I was just kind of shocked. And after a while, he's like, you sell? Like USEL, you sell? And I said no, and he replied, I make gill, I sell. And so I called a GM, and the GM looked into it, and suddenly that guy disappeared, and I never saw him again. Now,
I think he thought that you were a fellow friend. He wanted to share the agony of being stuck to a computer for 20 hours a day farming gill.
Yeah,
you tried to give it. He tried to have a moment of respite, and you ruined it for him and got him banned. What an asshole!
That guy's family is probably starving right now because he lost his job because he got banned, all because of you. How does that make you feel?
Or he just logged on to the same character, but with an extra Z on the end of it.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I got a Mesrac, so, it was fine.
Oh, well, so long as you got what you wanted out of it.
Yeah, that's selfish.
That's what's important.
So, do you
I failed chemistry for that Mesrac, okay?
Oh, my God.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I actually exclusively farmed that Mesrac while in chemistry class in college, and no, I did not pass.
What's a Mesrac?
It was the level 75 pole arm, that big one that came out when Treasures of Odd-Urgon hit.
I'm assuming it was junk because I've never even heard of this.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
It was the best purchasable pole arm at the time.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
When TOAU hit, it was the best one you could buy.
I don't know why you didn't have a Gugnir.
I also played Dragoon in TOAU, so that's probably why.
Yeah. No, I didn't.
So, do you guys then think that there is any type of problem with the way that Square Enix's penalties are set up, or the way that they police them? I mean, I think it was actually Marcus Kyler in the chat earlier mentioning, does it matter? Are there even enough people playing right now to punish?
Of course it does. But I don't know. I feel like how many of us here, like out of all, the five of us, or anyone in your close friend circle, has been falsely reported and then banned for it? Anyone we know?
No.
See, not me. In fact, I don't actually know anyone who's been affected by punishments, but I do know a lot of people that have been affected by infractions that seem to have never gotten punished.
Okay. So I just feel like that for everyone to be like, yeah, it's just stupid that I got banned for calling someone an asshole versus someone else who only had a 1 day for hacking. But I feel like But that's when, goes back to the whole story thing. Is that really the reason you got banned? Because look at all of us who know no one this has happened to. It hasn't happened to us. We're just a genuinely decent person in the game and nothing has ever happened. So are you sure that that there's a problem with the punishment, or is it just you?
Yeah,
no, I think in most cases, when you hear stories like that, it does come down to not getting the full story, because just like there was a Overwatch post that went out about someone complaining that they had been permanently banned, like they got an IP ban, and they're like, for what? For saying a few bad words in a match? And then Jeff Kaplan came in and was like, I actually looked at your account and you've received over 1,000 reports for harassment and language and stuff like that. That guy definitely was not giving all of the story.
There was a rioter for League of Legends who, for a while, he was head of the player relations, and his whole thing would be like people would like be complaining about their ban that they got, and he would get on there and be like, okay, well, I've looked into your account. Here's the chat logs that I specifically led me to ban you. Enjoy. And he'd post them on the forums and let anyone see, and it became known as smiting somebody.
Team known as
That's
what?
awesome.
It became known as smiting somebody.
Aha.
Nico, what are you doing to Juxta?
What?
It's not Nika, I don't think.
Oh, that's gross. There's
What?
a row humping Juxta.
Oh,
Oh,
that's not
no.
me. That is
Oh, okay.
definitely why the hell would I ever do that?
I don't know. I thought that was you this whole time.
Well,
No, it is absolutely not me.
I think Jux is a pretty cat boy.
Yeah.
But is
I'm a
that
pretty
you
cat boy.
doing that? No.
Well,
No.
Excuse me, I'm a pretty male cat girl. Thank you very much.
Jeez.
There is a distinction.
I'm sorry, Aniro. You were about to say something.
No, it's gone now because you guys completely
s-
fucking derailed it.
sorry.
So
So
I had a point. I had something to add, but no, of course you had to.
We've still been talking about the same topic. It's still
if
relevant,
if
right?
it comes back, just say everyone shut the fuck up. So in this thing, they actually outline some quote unquote potential solutions, which normally would I think be a lot of would be pretty fair. But again, going based on the stories or the experiences that I've heard, I just feel like this allows for people who do exhibit really shitty behavior to get away from it for even longer, such as allow strikes on accounts to diminish over time. Allowing players to appeal their ban. That's something that should absolutely be allowed in there. Does anybody remember, because I think we talked about this and I think it caused a pretty big stir, someone had been inappropriately banned because of the way that their credit card interacted with the MOG station.
Yeah.
Anyone
Yeah.
remember this
Remember that.
story?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this person like had tried to appeal in so many different ways, whether it was in game, whether it was through customer support of various ways, and there's basically nothing they could do. I don't think we ever heard about that being resolved in any way, shape, or form. And to me, that type of thing is it's absolutely ridiculous that something like that would happen, and terrible.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really frustrating for something like, especially for Square Enix, who is notoriously bad at taking payments. They've never once had a system that
You're
was
like,
very
fuck
good.
Krista and all that stupid. Ugh.
From Play Online to Krista to, like, then you had the one where if you had I think it was a Visa card that you had to load up a separate website that could actually accept the Visa. Like, you had to, like, get a text message or something like that.
You had to use the verified by Visa stuff too.
Yeah,
which I know a
verified
lot
by
of places, but that's not just a Square Enix thing. But the thing is that like mine always says like contact your bank to do it, and I'm like, but my bank doesn't actually
But-
have it. So it was really hard every time I've hit that roadblock.
But Verified by Visa, here's the thing, it never worked with Square Enix. Like, most
No, it
places when I
doesn't.
have to use Verified by Visa, it works. With Square, it never did. Like, this is the only game where I ever had to go into a 7-Eleven at one point to buy Krista on a card so that I could actually play. So when
Oh my
someone
gosh.
when someone then gets banned because of issues with that, yeah, I can see how that's immensely frustrating.
And then when you call in, they're like, "Oh, there's nothing we can do about it." There needs to be something that you can do about it. Like if that right there doesn't show some of the disregard that this company has for their player base, I'm not really sure what other example to use to prove that point. One of the other things that they mentioned too is allowing different infractions to carry different penalties. I feel like I'm mixed on that. Like the idea that cheating, profanity, and harassment all carry the same level. Yeah, I guess it is kind of
That bothers me too. Like if you're just saying, "Oh, you're fucking bad," get like, why don't you delete your character? Or like actually then taking like cheating the game mechanics and
should be given an infraction for saying you're a fucking bad, delete your character.
but like people say that that's harassment. That's like you're basically telling them to kill themselves digitally. And so
Oh my
Yes.
God. Nika, come
But-
on.
no, but seriously, people will report you for that because you're harassing them. But then you can also
No.
oh yeah.
No one
yes,
has
they
ever
will.
tried to use the logic that you just told me to kill myself digitally.
But you said no, but they'll say they were harassing me and told me to delete my character. They will.
Okay, see now here's one thing that I am actually gonna show my support for. Right, if someone's harassing you and you don't blacklist them, I have no sympathy for you. Now I know that doesn't necessarily solve the problem because people can just hop on to different characters. They can tell their link shell people for you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
But if they're on another server in a duty, what are you gonna do?
Then you just wait till the duty's over.
Yeah, but then you report them because they were an asshole.
I don't think you can ban people for necessarily being assholes, but I guess that's just me.
Yes, you can. You can
hang
definitely
on.
at least get temporary bans for calling people names. That is a
come on.
thing.
I think that, and this is the point that I was going to make before, is that I think, in terms of community management, most games have gone from, what we used to see 10 years ago with something like Final Fantasy 11, have gone from a more personal and overseen system, and I think at least a portion of it is now automated, right? So I think that there's now probably a couple of tiers when you have a GM call. There's stuff that can be automated, there's stuff that needs a person to at least look at it, and then there's like a third tier that, someone actually gets involved. Whereas it feels like, at least with the way that games were run, and specifically MMOs were run 10 years ago, that everything got the personal approach. Everything went to level 3 right out of the gate, or there was a level 2 and then there was a level 3. Like, this automated part has seems to kind of be injected in there. And so I think that there's at least some problems that arise from that. And I think that's where you see the verified by Visa bans. It's where you see some of these more frivolous or weird bans that don't make sense. And someone eventually comes along and rectifies that. But I think it does a disservice. And I understand that gaming companies don't have unlimited resources or unlimited amounts of people that they can throw at a problem like this. I do have sympathy for that, and I do understand that at least some of it needs to be automated. But because every fucking game these days has an online community or has an online service attached to it, that there is so much more moderating and adminning that needs to go on than there was back in 2006, that I feel like everywhere is just overwhelmed, taking complaints and having to figure out if they're bullshit or not.
Yeah, and that's not even taking into consideration people that are putting in calls, not even necessarily because someone else is screwing up, but there was a bug. You glitched into a wall and you can't get out, or you lost an item, or something like that too, because that adds a whole nother level of it onto it that they also have to deal with.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's also, like we had talked about on Final Encounter Cast, there's also potential for major abuse here, because if you get someone, like let's say that a lot of people got upset with something that I said on the show. Has nothing to do with behavior, but it does have something to do with FF14. And they've decided to start reporting me to a GM in massive quantities, right? Like, whoever oversees that GM call either has context for who I am as a personality or doesn't. And that context may be the thing between a permanent ban or not. And I don't think that is justifiable or fair.
No.
If Square Enix has a problem with something I say on the show, my character is not fair game for them. I don't think, and there's no statement in the terms of service. There's nothing that Square Enix can do to touch my character data or to make the decision like that justifiable. And I think that, just being an outspoken part of an MMO community, right? Like, that shouldn't be your only protection that you have. There should be additional protections against people reporting you, quote unquote, in mass for something. And until we know how, exactly those mechanisms operate, and we may never know because Square Enix is not obligated to tell us, then, I think it's hard for us, without knowing the full context of the data that Square Enix can pull up and exactly the context of every situation, for us to sit here and say, with a wide with a wide swath or not, whether bans or any kind of action is justified.
Well, I mean, I think we can. You're right. We don't know exactly what's taken into account, but when you do go to make reports, they do always say, give us the exact date and like time frame that it happened. So you're right. Something people like reporting you en masse just because they don't like you on the show. I don't think unless there was a GM that had a personal vendetta against you or whatnot, that you
or
would see
didn't know who I was.
Right.
Or,
I don't think that would escalate in any way, because where would people be pointing them to? He said a bad thing. Well, where? Because it was outside of the game, has nothing to do with Square Enix.
Yeah, they're not going to do that at all. Like, people can be botting on Twitch and it won't matter because their only source is outside of the game.
Yeah, and if they were to point out, like, oh, okay, let's all just say, this is what he said at this point. Well, they're going to go and look for that. If, 15, 20 people are reporting you for something and giving timestamps for it, they're going to see that it's bullshit and bogus.
No, I mean, and that's what you think. Those are all the mechanisms that you think should kick in when something like this happens. But we, without knowing the internals of the company, we actually don't know that that's what happens.
Right,
Like,
you don't know
like
what gets caught up
it's
automated and what gets what actually goes before a GM's eyes.
And not just that, not just the automated thing, but if it goes in front of the GM, do they have a context for what is humor or what is not humor? Do they have a context for, because if someone heard me say, fuck Square Enix, they don't know what they're doing, this game is a pile of shit. Like, someone who works with them may take real umbrage to a statement like that, but it's in no way a bannable offense. There is very strict, in terms of, if you actually read the terms of service, there are very strict actions that can qualify you for a ban. And saying some shit on a live stream or a podcast is not one of them.
Yeah. God, that's a really, really good point. And going back to, all the stories that, again, we talked about years ago, specifically with some close friends of mine, the harassment went on for so many months. And every time they would report it, what they would basically get from the GM is, oh, well, just block them. And it's like, I block every character they make, every mule they make, and it's nonstop. They always keep coming back. And it's like they have this very, very, like you said, loose sort of rules that they have to follow, in a very, very strict, small percentage of rules that could actually get someone banned. Because, yeah, the harassment was absolutely ridiculous and went on for months.
Well, and we saw that happen with the person over they undercut someone on the market board and got looked up by their retainer and was being harassed by a whole free company.
That's the friend that I was talking about.
Oh, it's that friend. Okay, yeah, exactly. And that's a freaking nightmare, but there's only very specific things that can be, banned over. This is where you need to let your GMs have a little bit of leeway to be able to look at a situation and use some common sense and say, well, okay, you're right. Technically, that's not letter of the law in there, but that's absolutely ridiculous.
But at the same time, and this is what was frustrating about it in that particular case, they were just playing the game. Like once they actually stopped with the verbal abuse,
sure,
they were just playing the game.
Tenor Martin in the chat saying, to be fair, in that case, they wouldn't go after the characters in the game. They'd go after the actual podcast, that's the proper mechanism to kick in.
Definitely.
Right? If I ever said something on the show that Square Enix had a problem with, I'd expect an email, not a character tell. Right? Like, if Matt Hilton wanted to get a hold of me, he would not find my when I'm fucking logged on to 14 and send me a tell. He'd send me an email.
Right.
And that's how it's supposed to happen.
We would expect a C&D long before a character banning.
Right. And we would assume that most GMs at this point are probably pretty familiar with what our product is, because, most of the community team is pretty familiar with what this show is and what we do. So, yeah, you're right. Like, if there was a problem with something I said, I'd expect to be contacted outside of the game. But what happens when you muddy those waters just a little bit? And that's what I'm saying. Like, the fact, like, it needs to be crystal clear what is bannable and what isn't. And hell, we've seen this very malleable definition of what is bannable in terms of your forum.
Oh my God, that's
your
horrible.
forum behavior.
Our friend Shintason getting banned for potato racism.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing, is that, if Square Enix wanted to, if they thought it benefited their bottom line, they could be that overzealous with their adminning and their modding and their banning. But they're not. Like, they make that choice to not be, because, if you get this huge reputation of banning all of your fucking players, that tends to not go very well for you.
Well, plus you ban players in the game, you're losing money. You ban them on the forums, who cares?
That's true too. But I mean, if you want to kind of extrapolate how bad it could get, that's exactly how bad it could get. Unless it's it is totally crystal and clear and defined what is a bannable offense versus what is not, then I think that you end up doing a disservice to the bottom line of trying to attract people to your game. And yeah, you're right. Square Enix is hugely cognizant of the fact that banning a huge swath of your players is going to probably not really sit very well with your players or long-term fans of your game. But let's try to relate this back to something that we actually saw happen in Final Fantasy XI, where we saw the salvage dupe bannings. Right?
Yes.
And at the time, we were able to get an entire show out of that. We had Sonoma from Order of the Blue Garter come on.
Right, we did.
It was a great episode. We had a great conversation about that. But let's say something similar happened now with FF14, where someone was able to dupe an item.
Eureka dupe bannings.
First of all, would it be as big of a deal? No, because it's mostly points that we have to spend to be able to acquire an item. Also, we don't need 3 items, it's not structured the same way. So duping an item, there's no items that are powerful enough, except for maybe raid items.
I was going to say, yeah, I feel like that's the only
it would be
this could
because it
work.
was they would dupe it in the treasure pool, so
right.
So then multiple people could roll on the same item and all
so
get
like
copies of it.
But the way that BIS works in sort of this kind of fundamental way is that you're cobbling your gear together from multiple sources. So even if one system does have an exploit like a dupe, you're not going to be able to create 100% BIS gear out of that one system.
Well, even 11 was that way too, though. Like just because salvage dupe, you'd only use 1 or 2 salvage pieces. You wouldn't use them all.
Think of it this way, Nika. If you did it in FF11, that was a piece of gear you have forever now. Whereas in FF14, they duped those weapons. Well, you know what? In 2 months, when the new patch comes out, it's not going to matter.
So a ban in response to something like this isn't going to get the amount of reaction or traction inside of the community internally that a ban like the salvage dupe bans did.
I don't know. I think it still would be, because if your character is banned forever for duping something in like Diadem, I think it would cause a big flipping
Well,
deal.
here's the thing, though. Like, a ban on your... Think about when Salvage came out, when that was going on in, mid to late TOAU. If you got banned then as a character who was able to do Salvage, you had
a lot of shit.
Hundreds, days upon months of time invested in that character. Whereas you can get a max level character BIS in this game way faster.
For like $30?
Right.
If I lost my character that was, ready to go for salvage, that's representative of years of my life to get to there.
Right, but then you have to wonder too about the investigation that went into it, because I couldn't stop saying enough how grateful I was that for some reason my link shell never heard about the salvage bans until it was too late. Because if they had, I guarantee you I would have been in a party that had duped. And,
yeah, because
and the thing is that it's not just the instigators or the leaders that were doing it in secret. It was everyone in the party when it was duped was banned, whether you had any idea your leaders were doing it or not. And I think that also caused an issue with people like having no idea what was going on. Like, hey, why do we have extra in the loot pool? That's cool. Maybe there was a glitch or something. And then just went on your day, and then you got banned. And that really isn't fair either, in my opinion.
Well, that's because back in FF11, I don't know that there was even... I mean, for all we know, there could have been some type of point system, whatever. But when it came to the salvage dupings in particular, yeah, I think that was just an across-the-board...
It was anyone who was in a party when it happened.
Yeah,
That's
whereas I don't think you'd see that in FF14, because again, they seem to have, again, can't confirm this, but they seem to have more of like the 1, 2, 3 strike rule, and again, profanity, cheating, harassment, all kind of falls under.
But I'm pretty sure exploiting a bug in the game without reporting it on purpose is still bannable, isn't it? Without 2 warnings first.
Well, really, they can say whatever they want to say is or isn't bannable. But, it comes down to, I think, with Square Enix money, because I think that in FF14, if you find out that there's some type of dupe trick, even if it's for, Ultimate Bahamut coming out, does it really matter?
I mean, in terms of patching an exploit and fixing your code for your game, yeah, it matters. Does it disrupt the community to the point that something like the salvage dupe bans would, or the salvage duping exploit would impact the FF11 community? No, because here's the thing, is that gear, when you consider gear, right, like there is the statistical advantage that each piece gets you, but there's also a statistic on how much output that gear, like how many pieces of gear are out there and circulating in the community. And I think that is
because nothing's sellable either. I feel like in the other game, a lot of stuff is so much sellable. And I also think I don't think the biggest deal is the fact that the gear gets replaced quickly. I think that that's not really the issue, right? I think because that would still cause you to like kill things way earlier than you should be able to, and yada yada. That's still a big deal. I think the reason it's not, but I think the reason it's not as big of a deal is because there's less competitive aspect in this game in general. But like if you're competing in raiding, you're competing with your own self to get better. You're not competing with other players.
But all of the salvage gear, right, had it first of all was rare EX, so that correct. there was no marketable, like there was no secondary market on that stuff except for the mats that you needed to be able to craft it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in that way, I think that we can take the economic impact out of both equations.
That's fair.
Okay. All right. So now what we have is we have output of gear. How much of that piece of gear is out there floating around in the community? Because if you have something that has a very low output or has a very large initial investment that's required, like how much that one piece affects the overall stat curve changes. Because if you only have 3 pieces out there among the entire community, well, that's not going to affect the entire community now, is it? It's going to affect 3 parties total ever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. But FF14 doesn't follow that same core design philosophy where you can have pieces of gear that have such low percentage of output for players to actually get them, that stats wise it ends up impacting how we play. That has been what I've encouraged with things like glory gear or over eye level gear, putting that stuff in early, because then you would have a little bit more of that. But it also makes for a little bit more of an unbalanced gameplay environment, especially for those 3 parties or those few people that are able to get that item in the first place, right? So you've got a problem where FF14 doesn't think enough about its gear to make pieces that even feel that special, where people feel compelled to want to dupe them in the first fucking place.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by nobody cares. Of course, Square Enix is going to care because this is the coding for their game and they want that to be rock solid.
Right.
But I don't think in terms of the community, anyone would give a shit, because as we've already pointed out, we're on to the next thing in 3 months anyway. I don't think that there would be enough investment for people to care about getting that piece in the first place to find the exploit.
Because with the salvage pieces, I know to make one piece of gear, you had to pick up 3 different pieces, like a level 1, level 2, and a level 3. And then also with the level 3 ones, wasn't there only like a 50% chance of it even dropping from the NM or something?
It was super, super low. And in most
or 20%, like it dropped often enough, but not every time, nowhere near every time.
Oh no, I think it was even lower than that. And in most cases, you had to make the concerted decision to go a specific way in order to see that.
So same thing with Dynamics, you would sacrifice some NMs that drop very specific artifact gear for other ones. Or if you wanted to like clear the boss, you'd have to sacrifice other NMs that would drop certain gear. So there was a trade-off there, which I think is how D&M really should have been. You could choose to do gear or other things. But
well, when you were in Dynamis, like you asked at the beginning, is it a clear night or is it a farming night? And that was a very different experience and a very different run for each night. If it was a clear night, I mean, if you already had the clear, you could expect that it wasn't going to be a very exciting night for you.
No.
But even still, I know with like Dynamics boasted Dean, I think it was like there was still like 3 different paths to take to farm. Like if you went after this one NM, it would take so much of your time with like crowd control and sleeping and like sack pulling and everything to get to that NM that you're not going to go the other route to farm anything else. Like it was, you were farming for somebody's relic barred horn, and that was what you were doing that night Like that was it.
Well, and I like I've seen a couple of people mention this, but like there are speed hacks and stuff that I've seen raiders complain about, PvPers complain about, that Square Enix almost seems like they're not really doing anything about, right? Like we had
the
that
PvP
whole
one was bad.
The PvP one was really bad, and the FF logs was also, there was I remember at least one or two things around people calling out other people on FF logs for having impossible parses.
I remember there was that one guy in PvP who was like using pomanders from Palace of the Dead and like turning people into
Yes,
things.
right, right. But like the thing is that like we and I don't know, again, this may be just kind of the current nature of how stuff is and how social media is, but like it's sort of like we move off of that shit so quickly that it's like, dude, none of those players feel like they're punished, right? Like with the salvage bans, they went way the fuck out of their way to let every player know this is fucked up. If you do it, you're going to be banned. But it's like you see videos of this shit and then it's like, oh yeah, haha, they'll be banned. And of course they will be banned, but as a hacker, they don't give a shit. They're not going to care. So it feels like, like Square Enix even had the anti-RMT task force. You guys remember that shit?
Yep.
Whatever happened to FF14's anti-RMT task force, Square Enix? Why the fuck in Stormblood do I still have dudes in Limsa Lominsa shouting fucking,
I hate going to Limsa.
like replace H with the number 4 and like all of that shit for guild spamming, and all of those dudes just are able to make a new account and spam again. Like
it's funny because a lot of that had gone away during Heavensward and now it's back with a vengeance, and I just don't know what they're doing now that's preventing that from actually being taken care of.
But that's and I think that's my point, is that there's no consistency across the board, right? Like it should be easy enough to figure out who's spamming a guild a guild selling website into fucking shout chat and be able to ban them fairly quick.
I mean, I don't get tells anymore, at least, but it's it spams the same. Like I report every single person that I see, but my blacklist is full. I have to continually delete old accounts to add more to my blacklist.
Yes.
It's so annoying, and I'm always in Limsa, like crafting something or doing something, and it's oh god,
it's irritating. It's fucking
horrible.
Annoying.
See, I never notice them as much anymore, and it might be because I have like a special
Limsa Aetherite is horrible.
Well, I have a special chat box set up to where I just don't see shouts at all. But on that point, something else that I don't think we see as much of nowadays, and again, I don't know if it has to do with the way that Square Enix handles it, or if just maybe the economy and the market for it isn't there anymore. But back in FF11, how often would you see big announcements because of mass purgings of RMTs and like how much money was taken out of the economy compared to how much you see now?
We've seen maybe like 2 in the last year or so.
Yeah.
No, last couple of years. 2,
well, and I mean, also with this game, like when you were in 11 and you saw billions of gil taken out of the economy, that was going to have a tangible effect on how you played the game. If billions of gil getting taken out of the economy happens now, it doesn't matter.
Nobody cares.
I was going to say maybe that's the reason. Maybe because you don't really use gil all that much in FF14. Maybe for the RMT, there's just not much profit in it.
Yeah, no. The day that the first humongous banning happened, where it took like a trillion gil or something ridiculous out of the economy, I was rich overnight because I had just dropped all my gil and gear. Like I had a scorpion harness and a noble's tunic to sell at that point. It was a happy day for me, and that completely changed like where I was like positionally in the game. My status in the game changed overnight. That could never happen in 14.
Yeah. So I don't know, I mean, the conversation's kind of switched a little bit now, but I mean, no, I think it was still on topic, and this was definitely a lot more interesting too, the parallels that we've drawn. But I mean, overall, do you guys think that Square Enix has a problem with the way that they police stuff, or needs to undergo some type of upgrade?
I think it could. I think it could probably be better overall.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I say that is I feel like Square Enix has done so much to adjust their gameplay values to try to get out in front of this. Like I feel like gil is almost worthless as a result of gil sellers being a thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like they've created things like tomes and arbitrary point systems.
Oh. Yeah.
For us to have to, use to get gear and other shit, right? And you know, the more that you get, the more variety of currencies that you get in any game, like you can pretty much chalk that up to an attempt to try to circumvent a problem,
Well,
right?
it's a non-tradable currency is the thing. Like that,
Yes.
that currency, it can only ever be on your character. And so,
Right.
yes, I was completely misunderstanding your point at first. But yes, rather than combat RMT, they've said, well, let's just take what RMT want to use and make it not worth anything, make it not worth their time.
Exactly. But there's a fundamental problem there, though, is that if your economy works off of 5 different types of currencies, but you can only exchange one between players, then you don't really have an economy. That's a false economy. That's a fake economy.
And the bigger issue also is that when the one currency that you can't exchange can't buy the best stuff, or the one that you can't exchange can't buy the best stuff. That's immensely frustrating. Like, that's why you look at Gil and people just kind of laugh at the idea of it. Sure, it's there for glamour and it's there for building your house and decking that out, but it's really kind of it. Like people wore a scorpion harness in FF11 because it changed how good you were at the game, not because it looked good. It looked like butt.
And that's the thing is I don't understand how we or you know, like how game developers have kind of lost sight of that, right?
Right. Well, and I don't think all game developers have, but there are definitely more MMOs today that have gone away from trying to actually maintain an economy. And to an extent, I understand it. Maintaining and balancing an economy is a scary, daunting thing to do. But it's also one of the things that makes MMOs kind of unique and interesting. Like, think about EVE Online. Think about how much different that game would look without ISK being such an important factor in it.
Right. And I feel like you've got to roll the dice. If you're a game developer, dude, like, you've got to at least put some faith in your economy. Because I feel like FF14 is particularly bad about that. Because I mean, even in Stormblood, right? Like going from 60 to 70. I don't think I ever looked at the market boards once. Is that that's strange for an MMO, right?
It is. The only time that I did it when I hit 70 and I wanted to have, the highest item level possible at the time. And because I had 40 million gil, I went and bought the high quality crafted version of whatever the best gear was. Boom. And it did not cost me that much, guys.
I looked at the market board for the purposes of buying food for raid and on my alt to buy furnishings. Never for gear.
Glamour crystals.
And glamour crystals. Yeah, fair enough.
Make your own glamour crystals.
Ugh, but that takes time.
Time
and effort. Time is money. Time is money, friend.
Time is money, friend.
Yeah, but money's worthless. So time is worthless.
Damn it.
He's got us.
You just got a scallion.
Oh.
That never happens.
That sounds gross.
Fair point.
You feel sticky?
I mean, Nate, you definitely bring up some great points. I don't know that it needs to be there are places they could improve on it, obviously. I think in any case, there's always places where you can improve on it. But I don't think that there's a need to improve on any, except for maybe, allowing people an easier appeals process, right? Like this idea that when it comes like the Visa Pay thing, that you could have your account banned and when you talk to people, all they tell you is, oh, we can't help you. There needs to be a place that if they can't, that they can send you to so you can find the help you need to get back into the game.
Right. It's absolutely ridiculous that your payment could fail 1 month and then you're gone forever. Like that, it's unacceptable for you to be able to say, look, I made a very simple mistake. It's not a problem. It's just, you should cancel my service.
Or just like someone's bank doesn't thought it was fraud or something.
It's not just saying, hey, I want to be able to play without paying. No, I just it's fine that I
what
can't
do they
play
think
right now.
that person was actually doing? Like trying to cheat the payment system or something?
Exactly. Like what
come on.
Who are you?
I've given you my money and you've banned me.
Or I'm trying to give you my money. Please don't ban me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. No, they absolutely do need a way of having someone you can go to who is the ultimate authority at the end of the day who can say, oh, yeah, that's silly. Sorry, we'll fix that for you.
I think on the ban side, they need an appeals process.
Yep.
For sure. And then on the enforcement side, that they just need some more transparency. And obviously this isn't a big deal because it's not, I mean, like, I don't think it is a big conversation, right? Like this is kind of a one-off article by MMO Examiner, who we've already said is a
article.
Yeah, most time is a pile of garbage anyway.
Right. But yeah, you're right. If we're gonna make a top 10 list of FF14's problems, this does not crack it.
Yeah, I don't see GMs or enforcement being anywhere near the top of that at all. I think, you know, I think what we get in FF14 is industry standard.
I think that's fair. That's a good way of putting it. Actually.
Yeah, that's fair.
That is what has been established as acceptable for other games, for similar games, and there's no reason that FF14 or Square Enix should have to go to added lengths to, you know, like they should not have an additional expectation on them that's not on any other online game.
Yeah. I mean, they have a hard enough time delivering, you know, content to us right now. Imagine if they had to update their policies and procedures.
Right.
Well, that's horrifying to think about.
All right. Well, with that out of the way, this next thing, it's a lot more fun. This is going to be a lot more fun of a discussion here. And it's not normally something we do on this show. This is very much like an FEC or even checkpoint type stuff. But we actually made this particular list, not us as, you know, Limit Break Radio, but us
top 10
as a
podcasts?
community. That, you know, no, that's never going to happen. MMORPG.com released a list of the 10 greatest MMORPGs of all time, the 2017 edition. And I thought this would be cool to go through for a few reasons. The first is, yes, Final Fantasy XIV did make the list, but also... I'm sorry, is that a little sour in your mouth there, Escalia?
It didn't taste good. And I know about things not tasting good.
Okay, yeah. But the other thing that I thought would be cool about is obviously between a lot of us, we played a lot of different MMOs. And I feel like, especially since Stormblood